Okay, hi. We're going to continue talking about media writing here, but we're going to be talking about something new, and that is broadcast-oriented writing, or as it says here, reporting with audio and video, writing for television, radio, all kinds of audio and video. So here we go. I do want you to see broadcast writing tips under content in my Leo 2DL. Let me see if I can't bring that up for you very quickly, and we'll spend a moment or two looking at that. It's going to be under basics of AP style. So we've talked about AP style, which is there is an AP broadcast style as well. But we've been talking about print style. Now we're moving to broadcast writing, and there's a different style. It's not completely different, but there are some differences. So I've created this guide for you, and you're going to need to refer to this in your writing, and there'll be some quizzes and so on. So we want to write in a conversational style that the listener can understand the first time, also the announcer can read smoothly the first time. You would write short sentences, and we've already been saying that, but even shorter, really, 20 words or fewer. Also use everyday words in your writing, just sort of ordinary language. We, again, want it to be conversational. For radio, you write in all caps. I'll show you some examples of that coming up. Don't know that we will get that much into the very specific differences in radio and television script writing, but for radio, then you would write in all caps. Simple sentence structure, avoid passive voice, which means use active voice. When practical, write in present tense. And an important example of this will come with your attributions. Who says so? And with broadcast writing, we will use the word says, S-A-Y-S, in present tense, rather than said, S-A-I-D, in past tense. That's going to be one of the major differences in broadcast and print writing, and that has to do with attempting to write as much as possible in present tense in broadcast writing. Use contractions, which is something your English teacher would not want you to do, English composition. But in broadcast writing, again, because we are emphasizing conversational writing, a conversational sound, we speak with contractions. He'll, H-E apostrophe L-L, instead of he will. They'll, T-H-E-Y apostrophe L-L, instead of they will. He's, she's, and so on. In general, you avoid abbreviations of words. If in doubt, spell it out. For example, January, Monroe Street, Menlove Boulevard, General Patton, Barstow, California. All of these might be abbreviated in one form or another in print writing, but you spell out those words in broadcast writing so as to avoid any confusion live on the air of someone not recognizing an abbreviation. Avoid symbols. You do not use symbols. So spell out dollars, spell out percent, and so on. The numbers, similar to what we have done in print, but a little bit different. Spell out 0 to 11 in general. Use numerals from 12 to 999. You spell out the word thousand and a million. When we get to, say, for example, 12,000 or 12 million, you'd spell out the word thousand and million. You don't spell out the word hundred. There's an example down there about 2,500, 4,800 I want you to look at. It's too involved to go into in this video, but do look at that. There are exceptions. Use numbers for ages, for dates, for years, time, addresses, telephone numbers, scores. So have a look at these broadcast writing tips, which are under content in my Leo 2DL. You are going to be needing to use those in a variety of ways. There's a good article here. If we switch to the slide, then a good article here, Tips for Broadcast Writing. I'm not going to go through this with you line by line, but this is a very good summary of broadcast writing and explains a lot of the reasons why we do things. You see, keep it conversational there, use the active voice, and so on. Put the attribution at the start of a sentence. That's something I think that I should mention to you. In print media writing, we typically have the attribution at the end of a sentence, especially at the end of a direct quote. This is not a direct quote, but the attribution is at the end of the sentence. 2 men were arrested, comma, police said. Well, that's not conversational. We don't talk that way. So in broadcast writing, we would put the attribution at the beginning. Police say 2 men were arrested. And notice that we use the word say, present tense, instead of said, past tense. Okay? So here again is a good article that's in the outline that you can look at and take some time to read that, and you'll gain a lot from it. Writing the audio or video news stories are usually very short, around 30 seconds for radio and TV readers, which is a story without a soundbite. That might be 2 or 3 sentences, and again, conversational. The inverted pyramid is still in use, the most important facts at the top of the story. Simple sentence structure, even more so than in print writing. Broadcast writing really quite simple in how you approach it, and that may make it sound easier than it is, really. But we're trying to communicate in a very basic level. It is written to be read aloud and also written to be heard aloud, which is part of the reason why we try to keep things simple. A video here that I can play for you. This is a bit longer than most of the ones. I'm plugging my earphones in here before I start it so that I won't have double audio. I've been warned about that. So let me, I'm not going to play this whole thing for you, but I'll play 3 or 4 minutes. And this is good video about broadcast style writing.
Hey guys, I'm Patrick Murray from Channel 10. Going to give you a couple tips on broadcast writing. Now to me, the thing you need to think of when you think of broadcast writing, the one word is conversational. You want to write the way you talk. Maybe not quite as informally as the way you would talk, but you get the general idea. You want to write the way you talk because you're going to be talking on air, or someone is going to be talking what you wrote on air. So that's the point. You're writing for the ear, not for the eye. And I think that's actually a little bit easier once you really get the flow of it. I think it's easier to write for broadcast than it is for print, just because, I mean, you're writing the way you talk, and that's something that you do all the time. So to me, once you get in the flow of it, it's a little bit easier to do. But when you first get started, I think it's harder because you're so used to writing for a class, writing papers for a class or something like that, where you're writing formally, and then, or writing for print where it's a little bit more formal. So I think it's kind of harder to get going on it because you tend to want to write the way you do for class or for print or something like that. But you just got to practice at it and get working at it, and you'll be fine. You just want to think to write conversationally, and keep in mind that someone is going to be reading this out loud. No one's going to be reading this on a piece of paper or on a newspaper or on a website, something like that. No one needs to see it, but someone has to say it out loud, and then people have to listen to it. So that's what you want to keep in mind. Your viewer is not going to be reading what you write. They're not going to be seeing what you write. So it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't, maybe it doesn't have to have quite the right punctuation. Maybe it has less punctuation, or the punctuation is different. Like, for example,
I'm going to pause him there. I generally agree with what he's saying, but I don't want you to think that you don't have to be concerned with punctuation. If you don't have the correct punctuation or consistent punctuation, then especially if someone else reads what you write, you could really cause some problems for them. And even if you're going to write what you wrote, it may cause some confusion for you. So what he's going to tell you in a moment here, I agree with. He's going to talk about ellipses, which are the 3 periods that sometimes you see that indicate that something has been left out. In this case, that's not how they're used. He'll explain that. And he has another little tip for unusual punctuation that you normally would not do in ordinary writing.
When I'm writing for myself to read, I typically like to use ellipses, like maybe 3 or 4 periods, instead of a comma, just because I think it's easier on the prompter, which I'll show you in a second. It's easier to see on the prompter if you had a comma next to a big, those big capital letters on the prompter, a little bit harder to see. So to me, when I see the ellipses, I know that means, hey, give a little bit of a pause there, like you would for a comma. And then another thing to think about along those same lines is you can put emphasis on words. So like there may be certain words that you want to put emphasis on air, so you want to do that in your script. You may put a couple of asterisks around that word to tell yourself, hey, emphasize that word, or something like that. And that's something that you can do in broadcast because no one's actually going to see it. So when I'm doing a sportscast or when I'm doing a report from the studio at the station, here's what I'm seeing. I'm looking at the camera and it's got the prompter right there. So this is what, keep in mind that this is what you're writing for, is someone to read this right here. And our big topic yesterday was Ken Sparks.
Here is the ellipses. After the word Robin, this is what he was talking about a moment ago. Instead of a comma, the 3 periods in a row, that's a little more visually arresting and gives him more of a sense that he needs to pause when he sees that ellipses. The other thing he was talking about is putting asterisks, looks like a little star, almost 6-pointed star, on either side of a word or a phrase that he wants to emphasize. He wants to give it more force. And I do that myself in some of my writing, and that's not something you would ordinarily do, but I do think it's helpful.
Retiring from Carson Newman, so here's one of the stories that I wrote yesterday.
But again, what he's talking about here is good because he's showing you the teleprompter. And for television, this is almost literally how the announcer, anchor person, would read the script is from the teleprompter, and this is what that person would see. That's a helpful video there to see. And let's get back to where we were. Useful video there. Types of broadcast stories. We have the reader, where the anchor person reads a story live. There is no other video or audio that is part of that story. It's just the script, and the anchor person reads it live. A voicer in radio is a story that is pre-recorded by a reporter other than the anchor person, so that you have multiple voices in a newscast, and it's not as dull as it would be if it was one person and only one person whose voice was heard for 5 minutes or so. A rap is the same as a voicer, except it has a soundbite in it. And the term soundbite means that's a clip, a short little piece from an interview that has been done with someone who's in the news. So a rap is a voicer with a soundbite. In television, voiceover is a story that is basically a reader, except there is B-roll. And B-roll is a term for video that has been shot and that is relevant to the story. And so the viewer would see the B-roll, would see the video while the anchor person reads the story. A package, similar to a rap in radio, this is a story that has been pre-recorded by a reporter, and it's going to include a sound bite in that story, maybe more than one, and it will also have B-roll or video as a part of the story. And it's, again, pre-recorded, pre-produced, and the anchor person introduces it, and then the rest of the story is in the rap. Raps and packages require a lead-in for the anchor to read, introducing the story. We have some raps here from Channel 8 on Channel 8's YouTube page. I don't think I'm going to play one of these for you. I'll show you the page. I do think you would benefit from having looked at this and studied some of these stories. But look how long they are, most of them. Here's one that is a minute 55, 2:02, 2 minutes and 2 seconds, 2:28, which is really a bit longer, but that's a live story, and that therefore might run a bit longer because it's live. 1:51, 1:35, 2:05. So most of the television stories are going to be about a minute and a half to 2 minutes or so long. Let me show you this. This is from the Texas State Network, whom I work for part-time. And you would not be able to see this directly yourself. So I'm going to log into it for you. And we were talking about lead-ins, that a rap or a voicer needs a lead-in. So I was going to show you a particular story here that I was going to show you. There's several things I can illustrate from this. This is a radio story from the Texas State Network. Let me see if I can enlarge this a bit. There we go, good. So here is the lead-in. New rules for restaurants start today in Texas. The anchor person on the radio newscast would read that line. And then Michael Board is the reporter. And the rest of the story is recorded in Michael Board's voice. And the listener then would hear the rest of the story as spoken by Michael Board. Under the governor's COVID rules, restaurants can now open to 75%. It's a shot in the arm for an industry that has been hit hard by the pandemic. Now notice, here's an example where we don't use symbols. You spell out the word percent. Remember I said we don't use symbols. So there's an example we're spelling out percent. The story here, again, this is a radio story. You see this is in all caps. And I'm not sure exactly how radio got started doing that, but it has. And so radio typically is written in all caps. Spokeswoman Anna Tausen says, here's the attribution at the beginning of the sentence, like we talked about. Says, not said. Present tense. So here where it says cut, what that means is basically soundbite. There's a soundbite there. So this is a lead-in to the soundbite. Spokeswoman Anna Tausen says that's because people are still afraid to eat out. And then the soundbite is heard. And then there's usually one line after the soundbite. This is a rap, by the way. We talked about a rap story that's pre-recorded by a reporter, has a soundbite in the middle. She says Congress provided 8 weeks of relief for a 6-month problem. She says, again, present tense. She says, S-A-Y-S, present tense instead of S-A-I-D, said, past tense. So that's, in brief, notice this story runs 34 seconds. That's the total length of the story. But there's a lot of information that's conveyed in that 34 seconds. There's 13 stations of the Texas State Network have taken this story, so that's about as many as I have ever seen. So there's a lot of interest in this story among the stations. They think their listeners are going to be very interested in it. And that story will be heard by a lot of people. Okay, so to continue on, can you tell what the story is about in one sentence? Ideally, you can. Simplicity is what we really value and what we go for. And then build the story on that one sentence description. If you understand the story, you will tell the story well, if you understand it. But if you don't understand it, you're going to have a hard time explaining it to someone else so that they understand it. So it's important that you understand it and understand it well enough to explain in one sentence, what is this about? And then we build around that very simple, basic idea. We are still building on who, what, when. Who, what, when, and where would be good. And again, I think I've told you who and what are by far the most important of the who, what, when, where list. Who is involved in the story? Who is the story about? What is the story about? Almost never is where is the story. What if we don't know who and we don't know what? It doesn't matter where. Also doesn't matter when. You see, so who and what. Focus on who and what. But also we need to know where and when. If we can explain how and why, then good. A lot of times we can't explain that. We don't know how. We don't know why. But who and what are the things that are most important, and then where and when. And to the extent that we know how and why, we certainly should include those in the story as well. That still, however, who, what, where, when is the way that you build a story. Answer those questions and you'll have a story. Okay, so we will leave it at that for now, and we'll see you next time.